Recording. All right. Hello, hello. Hope you guys are doing fine. Let's see a few notion docs, then we'll start. Notion doc, notion doc. Come on, open up. There we go. Kubernetes. Tomorrow, Paka. Bounty dispense. I think your bounty was dispensed. If not, just ping Aryan. I'm doing good. How are you guys doing? I know offline videos much needed. I have a stack now. Let me take you through it. Akash sent it to me yesterday. I want to speed up the cohort now by adding a bunch of. Sorry, 1 second. This one's important. Hello. Hey. Ooh, sorry about that. Important call. Close. All right. Pause chat. Yeah, what I was saying was I have a stack of offline videos now. One DevOps, 4 web dev, and I think 4 in Web3, like 9 videos. I want to speed up the cohort, so because I want to. My hope is to finish it by June or July max. So that will probably only happen if we have offline videos. I don't think I can. By that I mean recorded videos. नहीं तो फिर वही है खिंचता जाएगा. I think the frequency is really less right now. So let's see if we can speed it up. Not let's see. Something I have to do. WebRTC. Probably do a YouTube video. I'll probably do a YouTube video that full WebRTC bootcamp, 4-5 hours. I'll cover everything I know. 803. Anything else? Golang. Let's take a pause on that. Again, will be probably a very long offline video in the cohort only, not on YouTube. Anything else here? I'm in Bangalore. I came for the Solana meetup, but I had to stay for a pod. Usi ki call आई थी अभी. I'm doing a podcast with someone nice. That's a good podcast. Whenever that comes out, you'll know soon enough. But that will probably be the next video. It's someone influential, probably, if you know. I don't know if you guys know him. Most of you will, but let me not reveal the guest just yet. Cool. Let's get right into it. Today we're doing serverless, one of the easiest technologies. In fact, this is probably something that should be covered in the initial part of the cohort. It's that easy. Since it is easy, that is why a lot of startups use it. You should use it in a hackathon. It's a great technology with one small problem, which is when your project scales, it will be very expensive. It also is slow from time to time for some reasons. So that is the high level context of why would you want to use serverless over your own servers. We'll talk about what serverless is very soon. I don't see a co-host today. Oh no, there is someone. So whoever is the co-host, it says my name, but can you please stop the hand raises? How can I make you co-host? You are a co-host. Cool. Let's get right into it. We'll kick things off. Before we understand serverless, let's understand what are backend servers. You don't need to understand this. You know this already. Whenever you hit api.google.com from, let's say, your house, then what is effectively happening is you are hitting a server somewhere in the US, India, Australia, North America, South America, wherever you have hosted. We have created our own servers in AWS abhi tak. You have hosted your backend applications here. You have used Nginx as a reverse proxy. You have added certbot for HTTPS. So this part we have done. It is great. It works. There is one small inconvenience in it. You have to know a little bit of DevOps to be able to deploy the application, right? You need to bring up a server in AWS, which is, let's say, sort of hard. You have to clone your repository over there, start the process, understand ports, open the ports, security groups in AWS, understand about certbot, Nginx, so many things you have to learn, which is great. That is the difficult thing to do. The easy thing to do is serverless, what we're learning today. So this architecture we understand abhi tak now. We might have used Express to create a backend server. Yes, we have. The way to run it is run node index.js, which starts the process. Whenever you have to deploy it on the internet, You either go to AWS, GCP, Azure, get a virtual machine, put your code in an auto scaling group, create a Kubernetes cluster, various ways to deploy your applications. One simpler way, or probably the simplest way, is serverless. The downsides of non-serverless, what we have learned about until now, is you have to take care of a little bit of scaling. That is not true for auto scaling groups. That is also not true for Kubernetes clusters. That is just true if you have a single virtual machine. The base cost is there even if no one is using your website. This is a good reason to use serverless. Okay, if today you deploy your application, most of you might have deployed it on Vercel for front end, Render Network for backend, because both of them are sort of free until users start to come to your website. So if you are building for a hackathon, if you are building for a client that is not going to get any usage, it's a good idea to use serverless or Vercel Render Network. They also are serverless only, even though you might not have heard these terms. But when you deploy on Vercel or when you deploy on the render network, your backend, you're actually deploying in a serverless fashion/scenario. The benefit of that is you don't pay any money, right? That's why students prefer Vercel and render network. Monitoring various servers to make sure no server goes down. This is the third benefit of serverless and downside of using a virtual machine. Okay, you have to constantly monitor, add Prometheus, Grafana dashboards, something we discussed last week. If the server goes down, you need to get a call and bring it back up, see what's up, debug it. So these are real problems that come. I guess the biggest problem when you're just starting a website is this. Okay, there is a base cost, $10 a month, that you have to pay if you are using the virtual machine wala route. If you use serverless, the base cost isn't there. We'll understand what that is. But before that, we need to understand what is serverless, because the term is very misleading. It says serverless, but it doesn't mean there is no server on the internet. So the technology we are learning is called serverless. It is used for deploying applications. So, Node.js application, Python application, Rust application. Not the dumb way, the better way to deploy is deploy to an auto scaling group, deploy to a virtual machine, deploy to a Kubernetes cluster. The other way is serverless. What is serverless? Serverless is a backend deployment in which the cloud provider dynamically manages all the allocation and provisioning of servers. So it isn't that there isn't any server hota zarur hai, but the cloud provider takes care of bringing up the server, scaling up the server, scaling down the server, and you pay on a per request basis. If your application is in a hackathon, 10 people are going to use your application for 2 days and then no one will use it. After 6 months, you will send it to a recruiter who will then visit the same thing. So no point paying $10 a month for a virtual machine. Just use serverless. Because in case of serverless, Cloudflare will only charge you, or AWS ki serverless offering will only charge you if users are hitting your application. AWS or Cloudflare or DigitalOcean will take care of scaling up, scaling down. All of that will be handled by them. You only pay for a per request basis. So if you have less users, serverless is actually better because there is no base cost. If no one is using your application, you pay literally $0. If 20 people are using your application, you pay very minuscule amount, like, some cents. Of course, if millions of users start to use your application, then you do pay a lot of money. And a lot of times this money is more than what you would have paid if you were self-hosting. So self-hosting is a good idea. By self-hosting, I mean, creating your virtual machine. That's a good idea if you are expecting your application to scale. If it's a hackathon project, serverless is a good idea. Very hard to migrate from serverless to virtual machines. Phantom, if you know this wallet, I don't have it right now, but Phantom is a big wallet on Solana. They, at least 6 months ago when I was talking to them, were struggling with this only. Okay, they started with AWS Lambda. Now they have extreme scale. And now they wanted to move to a virtual machine. That was not possible. The same was true at Gather. Gather, we did not have a serverless virtual machine, but we had a serverless database. What is a serverless database? We can get to eventually. But wahan pe bhi we were trying to move from a serverless database to a managed database, in-house hosted database. The term serverless doesn't mean there aren't any servers. Instead, it means that the developer and operators don't have to worry about the servers. You as the developer do not have to worry about starting a server, scaling up a server, scaling down a server, pulling your application, starting your application, creating a certificate. All of that is handled by someone else. The easier definition of this is, what if you could just write your express routes and run a command that would deploy the application, auto scale the application, charge you on a per request basis rather than you paying for a virtual machine. This is the easier, slightly digestible definition of serverless. It does not mean there isn't a server. It is just that AWS is taking care of provisioning the server, scaling up the server, scaling down the server based on the number of requests that are coming. If there are 0 requests coming, there are no servers running your code. As soon as the first request comes, it'll start a small server, virtual machine, container, something else. It starts something. We'll come to what that is. But only when the first request comes, let's say after 1 year of you deploying your application, does it start a small container. वहाँ पे it runs your application. If 100 people come, a container is enough. If a million people come, then 20 containers are started. The problem with this approach is, even though it's very convenient as a developer, the downside is that it is very expensive at scale. And by very, I mean very expensive. Both serverless databases and serverless backends, which is what we're discussing today, get very expensive very quickly, and it's very hard to migrate away from them. Serverless backends are still easy. Serverless databases are really hard to migrate off of because you have to copy over the data from your serverless database to your managed database, which is always a scary process. And there is another thing called the cold start problem that exists in serverless. These are standard interview questions, by the way. Cold start problem kya hoti hai? Okay, when you are deploying your application on serverless, what did I say? It's serverless. So if this is the world map, and let's say, this is the US or whatever, Asia, Africa, and Australia. If a user over here comes and wants to hit your backend, wants to hit api.100xdevs.com. If you had deployed it on a virtual machine, then this will resolve to the IP of a virtual machine. The request will go to the virtual machine. Problem is you are paying $20 a month for the virtual machine. That's very bad, or slightly bad. Serverless mein, if no one is hitting api.100xdevs.com, it is literally running nowhere. Your application code is not currently running anywhere. When the first user comes and tries to hit api.100xdevs.com, is when a small, call it container, call it virtual machine, call it isolate. There are various ways to start this small thing. We'll talk about what that small thing is. But kahin pe your code starts. A very small version of your code starts. And that is where your request goes. And most probably, in case of serverless, if you are in the US, a small container will start in the US. If another user comes, they will also start to hit the same small container. If a third user comes, they will also start to hit the small container. If a fourth user comes in India, let's say, then another small container will start over here. It will run your Node.js code. Your request will go over here. If a third user comes in Africa, another small container will start over here. Your code will start to run over here. The cold start problem is when the first user comes and hit. If your application no one has been using your application for a year, and then suddenly the first user comes and hits it, there is no server currently running your application. No server is currently running your application, and hence it takes like 3 seconds, 4 seconds to start the very first container. That is called the cold start problem. Cold means that there is nowhere that your code is running. It's cold right now. As soon as the code starts to run somewhere, it becomes warm. It means that some place your code is running. So what is the cold start problem, which is not a very big problem in serverless, but still a problem. Why do I say it's not a very big problem? Because your application will be used, right? That's why you're building it. It will only be a problem if there are 100 users, 1,000 users. And if you have 1,000 active users, then cold start problem wouldn't even hit, because you always have someone hitting your application. Only if you have 0 users, raat ko, then suddenly in the morning you have 1 user or 2 users or 10 users, will they start to see a cold start problem, because the server will have to restart or start your code for the first time. So 1 or 2 users will see this cold start problem. It's not a very big challenge. It works. There are also solutions to the cold start problem, which is again a standard interview question. Okay, how do you solve a cold start problem? The answer is very simple. Okay, you always have a warm pool. You always have a pool of machines. Okay, minimum 4 containers, so I will always have. And then if more users come, then you can, of course, add more and more machines all over the world, or more and more containers all over the world. But you have like a base of 3 containers always running. That means you will have to pay for these 3 containers on a monthly basis, even if no one is using your application. But the upside is you will not see cold start. So that is one way to solve the cold start problem. There is another way to solve the cold start problem, which is always have a bot running somewhere. always have a bot running somewhere. A bot का मतलब कुछ नहीं, a script that is hitting api.100xsteps.com every 5 seconds, let's say. That way, Cloudflare or AWS will always make sure that some container is up, because every 5 seconds it is receiving a request from a bot. Cold start becomes a problem अगर 1 घंटे तक कोई नहीं यूज कर रहा है, because if no one is using your application for 1 hour, then Cloudflare will stop all the workers. It will be like, why to run an application that no one is using? Then suddenly when a user comes, then it will have to start the container, which will take 5 seconds or 10 seconds. So the first request will be really slow. That is the cold start problem. What is the way to fix it? Either have a warm pool, either have 4 machines always running, or have a bot that's constantly hitting api.100xdevs.com, and that way Cloudflare will feel like this is a legitimate user. So Cloudflare will make sure at least one container is running to serve this bot request. Downside, again, you have to pay for the bot requests, but like how many are there? 5 seconds may one request is going. That's, let's say, to 20,000 requests a month. That's not very expensive. So those are the downsides of using serverless backends. We'll see them in action as we start to code it. Okay. So recap, we are learning about serverless backends. They are different from how we have deployed backends until now. Serverless exists for frontend as well. Vercel is exactly that. Vercel is nothing but serverless frontends. Serverless exists for databases as well. NeonDB is exactly that. When you start a server by going to NeonDB or neon.tech, whatever the domain name is, you are starting a serverless server. What is a serverless database? What does it mean to be a serverless database? It means the same. Based on the number of requests to the DB, the database compute is going up. The storage, based on how much data you are storing, the storage of the database is going up incrementally. You don't have a managed database over there. You don't have a 4 GB RAM, 200 GB space machine that's running your database. You have told Neon, as data comes, please increase. I don't care. You are a serverless provider. In this case also, it gets very expensive very quickly. And at some point, you should move off of, serverless databases like Neon over to your managed databases. Managed database matlab, you have your limits, you have your machine, you deployed Postgres over there. Cool. Every cloud has this. Today I learned even DigitalOcean has this, because I met an engineer who built this at DigitalOcean. There is this engineer from India called Nikhil, one of the few Solana engineers from India who make a lot of money, who works as a, I don't know what his role is, probably founding engineer, but he works at one of the biggest Solana companies, probably the second or third biggest Solana company in terms of revenue, called Helios. He joined there 2 years ago, and before that he worked at DigitalOcean for 3 years, where he was literally building the infrastructure for serverless. He has done research in this, how does serverless work, how do you divide a machine into smaller parts, isolated servers. We'll come to what this is in the next slide, but long story short, all cloud providers have this, and using them is very easy. Building them is actually slightly harder. What is this? Building, like whoever is the engineer who's building AWS Lambda or Google Cloud Functions or Cloudflare Workers or NeonDB or Firebase, if you've heard of it, that's the slightly harder bit that involves some level of research. We'll go through the Cloudflare architecture very soon. Using them is very easy. That's why all initial engineers use serverless to quickly spin up. That's why you use Vercel to deploy your applications, right? One click deploy, it automatically deploys. You don't have to do anything. So that is why young engineers prefer this, but again, long run may not the best thing to pursue. These are the names for their offerings on various cloud providers. We are going to learn about Cloudflare Workers today. One more thing we should learn about is Lambda, because Cloudflare Workers is only limited to, it was only limited to Node.js until the last cohort. Now they've introduced Python, which is something I learned last week. They don't have support for Rust, Golang, but AWS Lambda has. It has support for a bunch of languages. So this might be a good idea for us to explore as well. Cloudflare Workers is what we are exploring today. So one last slide, I think, before we start to get into the architecture. When should you use serverless? When you have to get off the ground fast, hackathon. When you can't anticipate the traffic and don't want to worry about auto scaling. This is actually another very big reason. If you have all the money in the world, then serverless is preferable, because they will automatically scale up and scale down. You don't have to worry about bringing up your infrastructure, scaling up your infrastructure, scaling down your infrastructure, which does come with a lot of dev cost, right? Developers, DevOps engineers are expensive, especially the ones who are taking care of auto scaling based on your based on your usage. And hence serverless is good, because zyada users scaling up will be handled by serverless. We are paying Cloudflare for this. We are not paying a DevOps engineer. So that's the pros and cons of using serverless. If you ever have low traffic, then and you want to optimize for costs, then serverless is good. You'll pay nothing only. You'll pay some cents. And Cloudflare, I think they have 1 million free requests per month, something like that. So unless you have more than 1 million requests, you don't pay them anything, which is great. If you have 100K requests per month, then serverless is great. You don't pay anything. If you move to an EC2 machine, then you at least pay the base amount, which is $20 a month. Cool. Let's start to set up Cloudflare workers. So step one, quickly sign up on Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a cloud provider, obviously, which is generally used for just one thing, which is CAPTCHAs. If you've ever seen CAPTCHAs, if you've heard of DDoS attacks, Cloudflare is one company that has optimized this really well. If you ever hit scale and you get under a lot of attack, you might have heard Hitesh, who's another YouTuber. He recently got into a bunch of attack. I'm sure Cloudflare is what he used to fix it. Very common thing you would use to fix whenever you're getting DDoS attacked. That was their first initial pitch. Eventually, now they're a proper cloud provider. They do a bunch of things. Domain names you can buy from here. They have an S3 compatible storage. They let you bring up workers, which means deploy compute. They have some AI things as well. But originally, and most probably, their major revenue is this. If you click on under attack, that's their biggest call out, right? As soon as you reach the website, it says under attack, because the biggest thing they solve is whenever your website is being attacked by DDoS or a bunch of other common attack vectors, they protect that very well. That is their primary offering. Everything else they're exploring. I've actually interviewed at their workers ka team a while back. They weren't paying much, so I did not join. But they still hire remotely from India, and it's an interesting sort of challenge. They actually have a lot of revenue from whatever CAPTCHAs and things like these. DDoS protection. They are getting into other markets. They're a little shady, and let's not go there. But their pricing model is very weird, which is why they face a lot of backlash. As soon as you reach here, you will see a lot of things. Amongst these, today we are working on workers and pages. As I said, workers or serverless is not something that you use just for backends. You can actually use it for frontends as well. We're not going there today, but today we just understand backends. The first thing you have to do: sign up to Cloudflare. Click on workers and pages. I think you don't have to put in a card, but correct me if I'm wrong. I'll give you guys like 3-4 minutes. And try to create a worker. The steps should be obvious. They're in the slides as well. But quickly try to sign up on Cloudflare. Click on workers and pages, and then click on create and try to go through the steps to create one. Let's see, do they let you do it without putting in a card? I think the answer is yes, but I could be wrong. Why do I have 26750 requests today? Seems like that is their free limit, by the way. 100K requests a day, which is beautiful. I just don't know who's hitting my application or my backends. I don't know why I don't think I have anything deployed in production over here. This is very weird. Probably the bounty tracker. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Cool. I think this should work for everyone. You don't need a card. Sign up, click on create, go to workers and pages, click on create. It gives you a bunch of things. You start with a template. Notice there is Next.js over here, durable chat application over here, Astro, which is a front-end framework over here, multiplayer globe application, which is some starter application of theirs. A lot of things it provides. Let's go with Hello World for now, which I'm assuming is a very simple backend. Yeah, there you go. We'll read through what this backend is. Don't worry about kya code likha hua hai yahan pe. There is some code over here. We're going to understand that code very soon. But click on create. To recap, click on go to workers and pages, click on create, click on Hello World, and deploy your very first worker. What is a worker, Harkirat? A backend. Harkirat, this backend code looks nothing close to an Express server. Yes, we'll come to how you make it closer to an Express server. What does it say? It says success. Your project is deployed on region Earth. That's probably them being funny. Most serverless deployments happen on Earth only, which means they happen all around the world. As I was showing over here, if some user comes from here, it starts over here. If user comes from here, it starts over here. If I click on this URL, my backend is hosted somewhere. It says Hello World. How does it say Hello World? We will come to very soon. But the funniest thing, or the best thing, the most alpha thing here is what? 1 second deploy. Aapki application deploy ho gayi hai. Send this URL to your friends. This is similar to api.100xdevs.com. Only the URL is a little different right now. Some project name, dot your Cloudflare account name, dot workers, dot dev. So, that is why it's preferable. As you can see, 1 second deploy, everything is good to go. 1 second deploy. 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 1 sec A bunch of other things here. Very easy to add a custom domain. The only problem is you have to buy your domain name in Cloudflare, which is something I would not recommend, because whenever your application makes money, Cloudflare will send you a fat bill achanak se, and they will block your domain, so you will not be able to move out of Cloudflare. That is a very sort of dark practice that they follow. Probably don't follow it anymore. I don't know. Some YouTubers called it out, but they do this. That is why I was saying their pricing model is a little weird, because initially they don't charge you anything, because in cloud you only make money from big players anyways. 90% of the 99% of the Cloudflare bill probably comes from 1% of the companies, so they only target those 1% of the companies. Just say you hit scale, no, they'll send you a fat bill and they'll say we'll stop your application tomorrow. So if you try to move out, they won't let you move out your domain. Hence you should not put your domain over here, is what I would recommend. Okay, doesn't matter, this is a backend URL anyways, so it can be api.100xfs.com, it can be something.workers.dev. Continue to project. There are a bunch of things that you can do after that in your dashboard of this worker. You can see the number of requests, deployments. As you'll update the application, you'll have more and more deployments, logs, whatever is being logged in your application, you can see it over here. Integrations, I don't know what this is, but probably, yeah, connecting to a database, connecting to Sentry, so on and so forth. And finally, settings, jahan pe the biggest thing or the most important thing would be variables and secrets, which means environment variables that you can add over here. Aate hain abhi, but don't worry. Are we guys good to go? Do we understand how to deploy a very simple Hello World application on a URL of our own for free using serverless on Cloudflare? If this is done, we can proceed to the architecture discussion, which is probably the most interesting discussion for today. How does Cloudflare Worker work under the hood? How does AWS Lambda work under the hood? How does GCP work under the hood? Everyone has different architectures, but before we get there, are we good to go, guys? Do we understand? Let's do a poll. Beautiful. 90% is decent. Let's proceed. How do Cloudflare workers work? If I ask you today to create a similar offering, how would you create it? From first principles. And whenever I ask this question, the general answer is, Harkirat, I will use containers, Docker containers. So the good thing is you understand, okay, if I'll very quickly, let's try to, from first principles, try to understand how would I build this. If I have a cloud, if I am DigitalOcean, what does that mean? Sabse pehle, it means that all around the world, in let's say the US and in Asia and in Africa and in Australia, I have a bunch of machines in a data center. Agreed? I have some compute over here, some compute over here, some compute over here, and in the fourth place as well. Now, I don't want to give the user a virtual machine. That is easy. कि उसको virtual machine दी, he is taking care of scaling it. I want to, whenever someone hits api.100xdev.com or your worker URL, I want to start a what? Should I start a new virtual machine inside which I run node index.js? And if a different user comes, let's say a second user comes that hits api.gaming.com, which is a separate client of ours that uses the same offering, Cloudflare workers or DigitalOcean workers, तो उसका कोड भी क्या मैं इस मशीन में चला दूंगा? Will I start the code of both the users on the same machine? Obviously the answer is no. Then they can sort of read each other's code, because index.js में I can write whatever I want. I can write to read the file system. तो I'll be able to read Cloudflare के दूसरे client का code भी. So definitely you should not start a machine and run sub clients ka code over here. So what's the second approach? Let's start two machines. If you have two developers or two end users, 100xdevs.com and gaming.com, start their servers separately, virtual machines separately. Great. What is the downside? Virtual machines take a lot of time to start up. They're very expensive. By expensive, I mean this one is taking 2 GB RAM, 4 CPUs. 2 GB RAM, 4 CPUs. If only one user is sending the request, do you really need 2 GB RAM, 4 CPUs? No. If a lot of people are using api.100xdev.com, it makes sense to have a dedicated 2 GB, 4 CPU machine. But generally, for one request, you probably need just this much. You need 0.001 CPU. You need 0.1 GB of memory. So how can you do that? Should I create such small machines? Again, the answer is no. You shouldn't create such small machines. You do need a single machine. But somehow you have to separate first user ka application from second user ka application. You should run them in an isolated sandbox so that this guy can't read this guy this guy can't read this guy ka code matlab, yeah, their applications don't clash. They have some resource limits that are independent. Have we learned something like this before? Isn't Docker exactly this? Isn't Docker, what does Docker say? Okay, you start separate containers, they can't talk to each other, they have their own file systems. One container, you can add resource limits. So one container can't take all the resources of this big machine. So that sounds like a very good approach. But again, containers are also expensive to bring up. When you do a Docker start XYZ, that takes some time to start up. That is generally expensive to run in terms of CPU. Is there something better? What if, and there are multiple approaches here. AWS uses something called Firecracker that lets you create very small virtual machines, and that is what powers serverless on AWS, Lambdas. These guys, thankfully, have shared what they do, which is very interesting. And when I read this for the first time, I learned a few new things that I never knew existed in the Node.js runtime. This is the reason they only supported Node.js. This is why I was surprised today when I read they support Python as well. But the reason इनको इतना time लग रहा है, the reason it is taking them so long to add more languages, because they don't use Firecracker, which is what AWS uses. They don't use Docker containers. Otherwise, if they were using a Docker container, they can support any language. They use something very specific to Node.js. So let's try to read. How does Cloudflare Worker work under the hood? If you don't understand this slide, ignore. For beginners, doesn't even matter. Cloudflare Workers, सबसे important चीज. Cloudflare Workers do not use the Node.js runtime, which means the code that you are writing, it is not running somewhere else by running the command node index.js. So Harkirat, what do they use? Do they use bun? Bun is another JavaScript runtime. Here I'm introducing a new term called JavaScript runtime. Do we understand what does it mean to be a JavaScript runtime? If I write this code, const, x equal to 1 console.log x, this is just code. It has not been interpreted yet. I can run this code in a Node.js runtime, which will do the same thing. It will log, 1 on the screen. I can run it in a bun.js runtime, which will do the same thing. It will run 1. Bun and Node are actually competitors. They are competing to interpret JavaScript code. What does interpreting JavaScript code mean? कि ये line को run करना, one by one interpreting these lines, understanding what they are meaning, converting them to machine code and running them. That is done using C++ in Node.js. That is done using Zig in Bun. So these two are what are called JavaScript run times. This is some JavaScript code, but it can run on the Node.js runtime. It can run on the Bun runtime. It can run on any other runtime that exists. And there are many JavaScript runtimes. AWS has its own. Cloudflare has also created its own JavaScript runtime. So the first thing to know is that whenever you are writing some code in Cloudflare Workers and finally executing it, neither node index.js is running nor bun index.js is running. Some Cloudflare interpreter, some Cloudflare runtime is running that index.js file. That is the first important thing to know. Hello. So why is that important? The reason that is important is because there are a lot of things that work in Node.js that will not work here. There are a lot of things that was true for Bun and JavaScript as well. Bun was not backward compatible completely with Node.js. There were a lot of Node.js code that you couldn't simply migrate to Bun. You couldn't simply write bun index.js because Bun did not support a few, things that exist in Node.js but don't exist in Bun. They've added compatibility. Now they're really close. Some 99% of Node.js code can run in Bun. But Cloudflare Workers, since they want to scale in a weird way that we're going to talk about, Firecracker, Docker containers, something else, they sort of limit the things that you can do here. Some code may run in Node.js, may run in Bun.js, but might not work in Cloudflare. Why? Because Cloudflare is not using this as the interpreter. It is not using this as the interpreter. They've sort of written their own interpreter, which is based on top of V8. What is V8? You discussed initially. It's the Google Chrome ka JS engine, which is something that Node.js uses also. which is something that Cloudflare workers also use, but they've sort of not written everything that Node.js has written. थोड़ा सा complicated है ये, बिल्कुल जरूरी नहीं है जानना, बहुत high level कभी Cloudflare में interview कर रहे हो, they might ask, otherwise not important to know. So let me just skim through it really quickly now. How workers work. Again, you don't need to know this. Very not important thing as a application developer, but though Cloudflare workers behave similarly to JavaScript in browser or the Node.js, there are a few differences in which you have to think about your code. So when you are writing your code that you want to deploy to Cloudflare workers, कुछ चीजें सोचनी पड़ेंगी. Under the hood, the worker runtime uses the V8 engine. The worker runtime. What did we discuss? Node.js is a JavaScript runtime. One is a JavaScript runtime. Cloudflare has its own worker runtime. What do they say? Under the hood, the worker runtime uses the V8 engine, the engine that Chrome uses and Node.js uses. The same engine used by Chromium and Node.js. The worker runtime also implements many of the standard APIs available in modern browsers. So there are a few things that actually exist in a browser, do not exist in Node.js, but do exist in workers. तो वो उन पे डिपेंड करता है कि उन्होंने V8 के ऊपर कितनी चीजें डाली. How many things they added on top of V8. The browser does not have the FS library. The browser doesn't have the HTTP library. If I go over here and type FS, it'll say it doesn't exist. If I type HTTP, it doesn't exist. If I go to my terminal and write node and write FS, it exists. If I write, what was the other thing? HTTP, it does exist. So all three of these are written on top of V8. V8 is the most basic JavaScript interpreter. Browser added some APIs of its own on top of it. Node.js added some functions, some APIs of its own. Cloudflare worker added some own, some mixture of both of them. The difference between JavaScript written for browser or Node.js happens at runtime. Rather than running an individual machine, for example, a browser application on a centralized server, worker functions run on the Cloudflare edge network. तो पहली important thing क्या कह रहा है? Difference between JavaScript written for browser or Node.js versus Cloudflare workers is कि जब आप Node.js application को deploy करते हो, how did we deploy it? Node index.js on a virtual machine. How do we run JavaScript inside the browser? I go to a website. That website is running JavaScript. How does Cloudflare runtime interpret code? And the answer is it sort of deploys it all over the world. पूरी दुनिया में आपका कोड कहीं छोटे से एक environment में run कर रहा है. It is running on a very small environment somewhere in the world. So if someone from here is asking for your backend request, sending a backend request to you, it'll get the data from here. If someone from India is asking, it'll get the data from here. If someone from Australia is asking, they'll get the data from here. Each of these machines hosts an instance of the worker runtime, and each of those runtimes is capable of running thousands of user-defined applications. Very important line. What were we saying? Yeah, there are many ways to run serverless. We decided our own, architecture. The first principles architecture that usually people get is start a virtual machine. Jahan pe we'll start a lot of Docker containers, one for every application, one for the 100x devs application, one for the gaming application. Cloudflare worker says this is very expensive. This cannot happen. Like, the reason this is bad is because a single machine can't run 1,000 Docker containers. But what Cloudflare does is on a single machine, this is the data center. Inside the data center, let's say there is one very fat machine. On their fat machine, they start one Cloudflare runtime process. एक single process start करते हैं. Node Cloudflare _ runtime. And this one, not node, that's bad. Sorry, Cloudflare runtime start, something like this. So that this one process is running, which is individually running छोटे बहुत सारे user applications in what are called isolates. The way Cloudflare scales this is that it doesn't start a lot of Docker containers, one for every user application. It starts something called isolates. तो ये जो छोटी चीजें start हो रही हैं, these are called isolates. Again, nothing you need to know, but the name is giving away what isolates are. कि V8 orchestrates isolates, a lightweight context that provides your code with variables it can access in a safe environment to be executed within. इसको थोड़ा समझने की कोशिश करते हैं. What does it say? It says V8 जो V8 engine है, जो गूगल क्रोम के लिए लिखा था, द V8 इंजन दैट वाज रिटन फॉर गूगल क्रोम, इट हैज दिस कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ isolates. What is an isolate? A lightweight context that provides your code with variables it can access in a safe environment to be executed within. छोटे छोटे लाइट वेट नोड जेस कॉन्टेक्स्ट, कॉन्टेक्स्ट का मतलब क्या होता है कि योर कोड, योर डेटा, योर इन्वायरमेंट वेरिएबल्स in a safe environment to be executed within. You could even consider an isolate to be a sandbox for your function. तो ये छोटे छोटे, think of them like Docker containers, but they are much more lightweight. A single machine can run thousands of them. So what does Cloudflare use to provision serverless environment for thousands of clients all around the world? They use a very specific Node.js technology, or not even a Node.js, a V8 technology called isolates. That is why they can't support Python out of the box or Rust out of the box. They are using something very specific in the Node.js runtime called isolates, or not the Node.js runtime, the V8 engine. That is how they have scaled themselves. They have a big machine. This is the traditional architecture. Okay, you start multiple containers on a big machine. What they have done is, okay, we start one process and हर user का code अलग अलग चल रहा है in that process. They can't talk to each other, but they're sort of running in the same environment. एक single ही मोटे environment में बहुत सारी thousands of isolates are running. And what are isolates? इस user का code यहाँ है, इस user का code यहाँ है. They can't access each other, which is exactly what we wanted. Docker gives you something very similar, but Docker is not as lightweight as isolates. That is what they use to scale infrastructure all around the world for thousands of clients with millions of requests for serverless, what their serverless offering. That is also the reason they only work with Node.js, or they only worked with Node.js. Now they have introduced Python as well. I'm sure they're using something, similar in Python, or they've used, they've created something more generic. But up until, let's say 6 months ago, they only supported Node.js as their language for serverless offerings. Okay. So to recap, this slide took you through how Cloudflare workers work. There is a blog post that covers it in a little more, not a little more detail. Basically, the screenshots that you saw were from this blog post. You should read it if you're interested in generally being a DevOps engineer, understanding how infrastructure works, especially such a core problem. Every cloud provider requires this. They want to compete in the serverless market. So everyone has their own approach of starting serverless servers. What is the challenge here? Challenge is to make sure that your users are able to scale up, scale down very quickly, and you don't get charged so much. You can use a very dumb approach. You can start a single machine for every user, but then you'll get charged a lot as the cloud provider. Hence, you have to find some sort of a balance where if you can't really start a new machine for every user, you start a bunch of machines which will run the user code in a very small worker environment that is isolated from the बाकी users का code. ठीक है, समझ आया? Great. नहीं समझ आया? Not a problem. If you want, read through the blog post. If not, that's a little too much detail anyways. Let's get into how you can use a worker next. मतलब how do you create code, write HTTP servers, deploy them on the Cloudflare worker environment. So here you will again need a Cloudflare account. Go to workers and pages. Abhi we just deployed this dark hill project. How do I make this dark? Appearance. There we go. We did it using their UI. Now we're going to do it locally. Now we'll actually write some code, deploy the application. So step 1, initialize a worker. You can use a CLI. Cloudflare has a command line interface to initialize a fresh dummy project. So let's do that. npm create Cloudflare and the name of your application. Let's name it a to-do application. Let's try to create a simple to-do application. To-do app week 32. This command will initialize a Cloudflare worker ka code, and it's giving you a bunch of things that you can do. Do you want a framework starter, something like Next.js, React with Vite? Do you want a simple hello world example only for backend? Do you want a template from a GitHub repo? Someone might have created a whatever to-do application starter. Someone might have created a Astro starter. So what do you want to do? In our case, we want to start from scratch. We want to learn this from scratch. So hello world example is what we will select over here. What technology do you want to use? Do you want to use only workers? Assets probably is serving the front end, if I'm not wrong. Workers and assets both. Durable objects are very close to storage, like very close to databases, but not exactly databases. They're closer to Redis, and they're also serverless, but we're not using them today. Scheduled workers, if you want a specific task to run every day at 12 p.m., you can create a scheduled worker, so on and so forth. In our case, we want a simple worker for now, a simple HTTP worker. So we can select worker only, we can select TypeScript as the language. And as you can see, now they have Python beta here as well. Earlier, they only had JavaScript and TypeScript. Let's wait for the project to start or initialize. I don't know what that question was. I skipped it. I don't know what that question was. I'll select no. I don't know what the question was. Do you want to deploy your application? No. Or do you want to use Git? The answer probably should have been yes, but no is also fine. Do you want to deploy your application? Not yet. Abhi, let me test it locally, then I will deploy my application. So cd to do application week 32. Open it in cursor. Source index.ts. Remove all the comments and notice the very basic boilerplate code that is written over here. Export default an object which has a function called async. अब ये थोड़ा hard हो रहा है read होना. It's a little hard to read. Let's make this a little less scary. Let's do this. Const main equal to an object that looks like this. And let's just export this by default. Export default main. One thing you should do here is give it a type. If you give main a type, so ye red squigglies will go away. You can also give these individual types, or you can just give main, whatever the name of your global object is, a type. What is that type? It is this thing right here, exporter handler of env. What this is, don't worry about. I deleted it, so let me do this again. Export const main equal to this thing, export default main, and just give it a type, which is whatever the satisfied thing was, which again I lost. This thing right here. This code that you see is a HTTP server. Harkirat, where is app.get? Where is app.post? Where is middlewares? Where is headers? Where is body? All of that needs to happen inside this fetch function. The way Cloudflare workers work is they expect you to have a single fetch function that you are exporting, जिसमें you will get request. कि request में क्या आई, what is the URL, what is the query parameters, body, headers, environment, which is what are your environment variables, database URL, things like these. Context is कि इस request का context क्या है, which could be things like अगर middleware में हो तो you set a user ID, you pass it to the next handler, if you remember this from Express. If not, that's fine, ignore context for now. And what does it return? It returns a promise of this response type. Is this syntax jarring? For this specific request, it actually wouldn't matter. You can simply return request over here as well. So you can do this as well. Abhi ke liye. Eventually we'll see how it changes. But ye complicated sa code jo hai, that is a starting point for your backend application. It doesn't have routing, it's very ugly. So we'll come to how to fix that. But let's try to run it locally. Let's see. Okay, do I see hello world whenever I hit my application? This application code is going to run on an HTTP server. ये जो fetch function है, this fetch function is what Cloudflare worker sends the request to, or Cloudflare worker runtime sends the request to. अब जब मैं इस application को start करूंगा, whenever I start this application, npm run dev, any request that I send is going to come to this function, which is simply returning hello world for now. Let's do hello world plus math.random. It's returning hello world followed by a random number between 0 and 1. So now, if I go to localhost:8787, 1 second, Forgot something very, very important. Suddenly remembered. There we go. Another thing I should do. I'll do that later. Cool. So, hello world space a random number आ रहा है. What if I go to slash random route? Same thing. Because we have a single handler for all of our requests. The way Cloudflare runtime works, or Cloudflare serverless, Cloudflare workers work, is that you have to write a single fetch function जिसके अंदर you will write the code to what happens जब ये request आ रही है. This will handle all incoming requests, be it to localhost colon 8787 or /1 or /1/2. All of these requests are going to the same function over here. Harkirat, then how do I write any application code? The answer is yahan pe you can, the ugly approach is this. If rec dot method is post, then you return whatever. And if request dot route URL dot, let's say, ends with /user, matlab the user is sending a post request to /user. Just an ugly way to put that out. Then return, this is a post request, and else maybe return something like, this is a get request. This is a post request to /user, else return something like, this is a post request to not /user. Something like this. आपको ऐसा गंदा गंदा कोड लिखना पड़ेगा, because unfortunately it doesn't have routing out of the box. Cloudflare workers do not have routing. What is routing? app.get /user, regress, the thing that we've done, app.listen 3000, things like these. Cloudflare workers don't have this, which is why you have to do this. You have to write such ugly code and figure out request karna kya cha rahi hai. We'll figure out how to fix this, but let's see, does it work? If I start the application and go here, it says this is a get request. If I go to Postman and try to send a post request now to the same URL, it says this is a post request to not /user. If I send a post request to /user, it says this is a post request to /user. Of course, there are bugs right now. If I send request to /1/user, still it says this is a post request to /user. If I send it to /1/2/user, still it says the same. There's a slightly buggy code. But इस तरीके से code लिखना पड़ता है in Cloudflare workers. This is how you have to write code, which is very hard, as you can see. You can create your own libraries on top of this, make it a little more cleaner. Something like this you can do. Post handler. And then यहाँ पे you can call another function called get handler, so on and so forth. But natively doesn't support routing very well. You have a single fetch function जिसके अंदर you have to write all the code. Return response.json message hello world. You have to write all the code to handle various routes, handle various headers, bodies, so on and so forth. Let's try to. It is running. We ran it. We see it works locally. Let's try to deploy it once. That's the biggest power of Cloudflare. Of course, it's very ugly. We have to fix this. We have to add routing. How will we create our to-do application? We will. Let's try to deploy it. For that, first you have to do npx wrangler login. What is Wrangler? Wrangler is Cloudflare ka CLI that lets you deploy applications on the worker, log in, redeploy applications, see the logs. बहुत चीजें तुम कर सकते हो if you have the Wrangler CLI. So when you run npx wrangler login, it will take you to your Cloudflare account. You just have to allow the Cloudflare, your terminal, to have access to your Cloudflare account. So if I click on allow over here, it didn't work for me. It should probably work for you. Let me do it again. I'm already logged in anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Allow. There you go. Access has been granted. Successfully logged in. Now, the Wrangler CLI has access to my Cloudflare account. npx wrangler now has some credentials to my Cloudflare account. So if I now run npm run deploy, it deploys my Node.js application on the internet. Of course, it's a dumb, ganda looking Node.js application. It does nothing right now, only returns hello world, irrespective of what route you are hitting. But it's out there on the internet, deployed on HTTPS, working serverlessly. No, I'm not getting charged. That's the benefit. The downside, very ugly way to write code. We can't use Express. That is the problem. Harkirat, why can't we use Express? There are reasons. The biggest reason is that Express is very heavily built for the Node.js runtime. It is not built for Bun either. It was not built for Cloudflare workers either. So Express doesn't work with Cloudflare workers. Express did not work with Bun also. Slowly they added compatibility. So Express to won't work here. You don't have very clean routing, middlewares, CORS handlers, request body handlers. वो सब आपको भी नहीं मिलेगा. We'll see how to add that eventually. अभी के लिए this works, and the best part is it deployed in a jiffy on to do app week 32.kiratechnologies.workers.dev. If I open this, I see this application over here which says hello world, which is beautiful. Why is it beautiful? Because deploying on the internet quickly. If I make some changes here, hello world 2, all I have to do is npm run deploy. It will redeploy the application, which will now return hello world 2. So let's wait for it to happen. If I open it now, my internet application says hello world 2. So do you see the benefit? If we were using Express, we would have pushed our code to GitHub. We would have logged into the virtual machine. We would have pulled our code from there. We would have restarted the application. We would have restarted PM2. So many steps we would have had to do. Cloudflare workers, if I change the code over here and redeploy, I see this is a different worker, but I see the change immediately. So do we understand how to initialize a worker? If you explore the package.json, you'll see Wrangler is a dependency over there. Start it locally. If you want to return JSON, return response.json. If you want to return text, simply return response.text, hello world, whatever you want to return. Where is the Express code? Is a very important question. ऐसा code क्यों नहीं दिख रहा? Why is this code so ugly? Why do I as the application developer have to write everything from scratch? If request.method is post, then do this. This means the user is trying to create a resource. Else if request.method is delete, then do this. It will become such a long file that's handling this. You can structure it, but still pretty ugly. The application developer shouldn't write such native code yourself. Express makes it so easy. Express simply says, ये सब लिख दो, app.get/route, app.post/route, so on and so forth. So how can you do routing? This is the ugly way to do it. In your fetch request handler, try to log the body, you'll see the JSON body. Try to log the headers, you'll see all the headers. It has everything. The request object has everything. It's not available to you as the developer in such a clean way कि आप ये लिख पाओ. You have to actually extract the method and then do your thing based on the method and the route and the body and the headers, so on and so forth. So slightly ugly, but is there a fix? Yes, there is. The fix we're getting into in the next slide. No, before that, deploying the worker, very simple. Use the Wrangler CLI. What command did I run? सबसे पहले npx wrangler login, then npm run deploy. These two commands. After this, make sure you're logging into Cloudflare. When you run npm run deploy, your application should deploy. As simple as that. And now your application will appear here as well. So if you see, to do app week 32 is available on my Cloudflare dashboard. You can create a hello world application from here. We did this a while back, and as you can see, similar code is written over here. This is just a starter code for a simple backend, or you can do it via the CLI. It still appears over here. You can still see the logs. You can still see the deployments, see the settings, do the integrations with NeonDB or PlanetScale, so on and so forth. Before we proceed, now we're going to come to a framework very similar to Express. But before we proceed, are we good to go? Do we understand a very simple Cloudflare project deployment that I've done over here? A to-do application week32.kiratechnologies.workers.dev. Do you see your application deployed on the internet for free that people can use? Let's do a poll. All right, simple enough. Cool, 93% is beautiful. So the next question is, how do you do routing? Answer is, can you add Express to it? No. Here is a I tried Express, like when I was trying this, a few years ago. I tried Express, did not work. Reached this issue. What does the issue say? Being a developer, I really love Cloudflare pages for hosting starting apps. But frontend apps usually need APIs to get dynamic data. I have an existing Express application. I would like to transfer to workers in addition to transferring my frontend to pages. Is it known whether Express support will be added to Cloudflare? So Cloudflare workers don't support Express out of the box. If you are an engineer, this is probably a good task to pick up. If you want to actually write languages eventually in the future, if you ever join Cloudflare, might be a great task to pick up over there. But यहाँ पे it says it's unlikely you'll see specifically Express on worker due to its deep Node.js dependencies. So Express is meant for Node.js. Bun also went through a few iterations to eventually add Express support for Bun. Otherwise, it's primarily meant for the Node.js runtime. However, there are still a lot of options that you can use. One of them being Hono. So Hono is the option that we are going to use, which is a ultra fast web framework for Cloudflare workers. Bun, Deno, Node.js, fast, but only not fast. I don't know what that means. There are a bunch of frameworks. The framework that we're going to use is going to be Express. Sorry, not Express, Hono. You might be curious, Harkirat, how can I migrate my old Express code over here? What if I want to move out from here and move to my own machine? So you can still do that. Hono supports a lot of runtimes. It supports Node.js, it supports Cloudflare workers, it supports Lambda, it supports Bun, it supports Deno. तो अगर आपको मूव करनी है अपनी applications, you aren't tied to Cloudflare workers. You can move your application easily. And there's some extra thing here which let's say ignore for now. But basically someone asked, if you really want to, yeah, there you go. So someone asked, yeah, it will be very hard for me to move between Express and Cloudflare workers and Cloudflare workers and Express. So what can I do? The answer is, if you can split your application into small components, that don't really depend deeply on Node.js. Cloudflare workers are an amazing option. This guy doesn't mean that वैसे. But basically what I mean was कि अगर आपको ये करना ही है कि you want to keep your application very generic that can move between Express and Cloudflare, abstract out as much logic as you can. 95% of your logic will be generic, will work with Cloudflare workers also, will work with serverless also. And ऊपर का logic, you can change between based on if this is a Cloudflare worker where you're running it, if this is a Express server where you're running it. But this is not a very practical approach. It sounds very fancy. It will never work. Your developers will never make sure that 95% of the code is abstracted out. They'll start to write gunk over here. So even though it sounds very fancy, we'll keep most of our code base framework or runtime agnostic, and only one file will be there that will be Express file, and another file will be there that will be Cloudflare file, and most of the reusable code will be separate. Doesn't really happen practically. Eventually developers will come write a lot of routes. They will forget to abstract out everything into controllers/users.ts or whatever. But this is something you can do if you want to slowly migrate from your Express application to Hono. You should first abstract out all the common things into separate files, and then eventually change the main file, the Express file, to the Hono file. Okay. So can you add Express to Cloudflare? No. So what can you add? Hono. What is Hono? So this is the author of Hono, his motivation. At first, I wanted to create a web application on Cloudflare workers, but there was no good framework that works on Cloudflare workers. For example, Express. Express is a crude framework, does not work on Cloudflare workers. So I started building Hono and thought it would be a great opportunity to learn how to build a router using try-ts. If you ever are building a router, very standard DSA problem, right? Tries सबको समझ आते हैं. And now everyone will be excited. Yes, sir, I've done 500 questions on lead code. So if you think about routing /tracks /something, if you ever want to find what is the handler of this, try is a good data structure, right? Try lets you do what you call this prefix search कहते हैं इसको, जो भी कहते हैं. Prefix search ही होता है ना कि given a prefix reaching that specific node, tries make it really fast. You do it in memory. So he wanted to do it just to explore that. Then a friend showed up with a ultra fast router called something. So long story short, he did a bunch of things and then eventually realized, this is a great framework, not just for the Cloudflare runtime, but for Node.js, Bun, wherever you want to run it. This was his motivation to build it. Now he has built it. These are the places where you can deploy it. You can deploy it on Fastify. You can deploy it on Vercel. You can deploy it on Netlify. You can deploy it on AWS. You can deploy it on super-based functions, Node.js, Deno, Bun. बहुत सारे runtimes को support करता है. So whatever code you write in Hono can be deployed in a bunch of places. That is not true for Express. When you write Express code, Initially, Bun did not support Express. Now it does. Deno, I think, still doesn't support Express. Cloudflare workers don't support Express. Lambda, I think, does. But Hono is, constantly adding compatibility for a bunch of runtimes, and hence it might be a good idea for you to use Hono as the framework for developing your HTTP servers. How do you do it? Just like Express, it has a bunch of functions and APIs. Let's try to explore them together. वैसे तो their docs are really good. If you go to hono.dev and try to look at the docs, they have everything here. How do you create a router? This is probably more theoretical, but let's look at their API. App, how do you create a very simple application? This looks very similar to an Express application, right? Import Express from Express, const app equal to Express. Rather than doing an app.listen, you simply export it. That is true for Cloudflare workers, right? यहाँ पे हम क्या कर रहे थे? We were exporting a function. We were not really, doing an app.listen. We weren't really taking a port on the server, right? I did not write main.listen 3000 or something like that. Cloudflare takes care of that. The runtime that's starting this file takes care of that. And similarly here, it's very close to Express code. Only thing is you don't really start something on a port. You just export it from here. The runtime will take care of running it. How do you do routing? App.get, app.post, app.put. You don't have a request and a response. You have a single C object or a context object or context variable, which has both request and response basically. So all the request arguments are there. If you want to return something, the response arguments are there. A bunch of other things are here. So a single argument you get compared to Express, where there is request, response, and next, if you remember. Then it talks about what this C is and where you can use this. This context mein hota kya hai. It has the headers, it has the body, it has your environment variables. Everything is in this single C object. We'll see this when we write it. Hono request, which is probably something written on top of request, the standard Node.js request object. But basically this c.request, no, it's not that. c.request.param ID. If there is ever a request that comes to /entry/:id, that means /entry/1 or /entry/2, you can get the ID over here by doing c.request.param of ID. If you have two of them, ID and comment ID, you can get it like this. Query parameters you can get like this. So very easy to extract these things if you're using this framework compared to the native Cloudflare approach that we took. This approach. इस approach से बहुत बेहतर है ये approach. Not significantly better than Express, but significantly better than this for sure. Proper framework for doing, HTTP backends. Exceptions, presets. What are presets? I don't know. Probably how can you create multiple routers? A lot of interesting things. But basically, we can dive more deeper into this. Hono also supports JSX, which means you can sort of return HTML from your serverless functions as well. Write React, similar to React code, so on and so forth. You can do a bunch of things. We don't have to go that deep, but we can if need be. It basically supports everything: front end, back end, in a serverless fashion, middlewares, headers, context, whatever you can think of for a backend server. So it's basically a full stack framework that does everything. Do we need all of that today? No. Should you explore all of that? Yes. Because if you ever want to create a full stack application that you want to deploy for a hackathon, great stack to just deploy it and forget. Just deploy and forget, literally. And you don't have to pay anything either. Like most of the times your application will not be used, which means, you will have less than 100K requests a day, which means it will be free. Cool. So let's write a very basic Hono application, guys. Slide number 10 covers it. So how do you start a Hono application? npm create Hono at the rate of latest and the name of your application. So let's do that. The name of our application is to do app Hono week 32. Where do we want to finally deploy it? Do we want to deploy it on AWS Lambda? No. Do we want to deploy it on Cloudflare workers? What are Cloudflare workers? They're front-end offering. No. Next.js, Netlify, Lambda. No. Where do we want to deploy it? Simply Cloudflare workers, which means we're just deploying a backend today. If you were deploying a backend and front-end, then we would have selected Cloudflare workers plus Vite. If we were running it using Bun locally, then we would have selected Bun. Cloudflare workers is what we're going to select today. Do you want to install dependencies? Yes. What runtime do you want to use? Now I'm using Bun. You can use npm. Doesn't really matter. Everything will work. So these were my configurations. What did I run? npm create Hono at the rate of latest, the name of my application, and then finally, a bunch of standard configs. Let me open this in visuals or whatever, cursor. We'll call something else. Sorry about that. All right. Here is a fresh, brand new Hono project. Let's look at it. Source/index.ts. Looks very close to Express. Let's see, does it work? If I go to npm run dev and I go to localhost 8787, I see hello Hono written, which is exactly what the app.get slash returns over here. If I go to slash something random, I see 404 not found. So great, a great starting point. Let me add a new, app.get slash user, and let me do a c.json message. User is Harkirat, something like this. And if I refresh and go to the landing page, I see hello world. If I go to slash user, I see JSON that says user is Harkirat, so on and so forth. So great starting point. Let's say we're creating a to-do application. What would we need? I would need a post endpoint for slash user, let's say, or slash API slash v1 slash sign up, whatever you want to write. I would need a post endpoint for sign in. I would need a post endpoint for creating a to-do. And let's say I would need a get endpoint for getting all of my to-dos. Simple enough. These 4 endpoints make sense. For a simple to-do application, I will need 4 endpoints. One for signing up the user, which means they'll send their username and password. I'll put it in a database. Sign in to sign in the user. Return them their JWT. Create a to-do. Get all the to-dos that this user has. Simple enough. Now we have to add the implementation, which means we need to add JWT. We need to add headers. We need to add middlewares. We need to add database, which means, whatever, Prisma, so on and so forth. So these are all the things that we need to add next, which are not very challenging, not very difficult from, different from Express. But let's see, does this work? If I restart the application, we don't have to restart the application. It automatically restarts. I've added 4 endpoints, API v1 sign up. If I go here, it says not found. Slash what am I missing? Oh, it's a post request. That makes sense. So I can't do it from here. I have to go to Postman. You guys probably figure that out faster than me. If I go here, it says user is Harkirat. So it is working. Are we good to go until this point? It's called this application logic. We'll write it together and explore the Hono docs. So a bunch of things are here already. How do you get the body? How do you get the headers? How do you get the query parameters? So you can read through this, you can read through the docs, but in the end, we're supposed to finish this Hono application, a simple to-do application ka backend. This is middlewares. Again, we'll explore these as we are finishing, and connecting to the DB is something we should do. How do you connect a serverless offering to a database before we write a real application? So let me just log a few things first. Before we create the to-do application, let's quickly log, the body that the user might send us, or the query parameter that the user might send us, or the header that the user might send us. So let's make this async. What am I logging over here? Sabse pehle I'm reading the body. Then I'm logging the body. Then I'm reading the authorization header. Then I'm reading a query parameter called, let's say, user ID. Something like this. That's how I've changed my sign up endpoint, just to see are we able to get all the things from the input, because we'll need them eventually when we need create our full stack to do application ka backend. So if I go to Postman, if I send a query parameter, again, what is the code over here? The code says the body, which means this JSON body right here. Let's say username Harkirat, password 123 header. So let me send a authorization header here. Send whatever auth dash key dash something. And then what's the third thing? Query parameter user ID. So let me send user ID equal to 1. That's how the request is being sent. I'm sending a user ID query parameter. I'm sending a body, which is a username and a password in a JSON format. I'm sending some headers. Authorization header is this. I've logged all 3 of these. Let's see, does it work? If I send this request, I see an empty object for the body. So we have to debug why that is. I see auth key 123 as the header, which is right. I see 1 as the user ID, which is right. So the only thing that we don't see right is the body right now. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this Sarkirat app.use express.json. You are not wrong, but I think that should do it. If you do c.request.json, I think that should parse the JSON body over here. So now if I send the request, I see whatever username Harkirat, password 123. How did I figure this out? I just guessed honestly, and the guess worked because what was written over here had no representation of the body. Like body get various types hote, right? When you send a body, you can send JSON, you can send text, you can send URL encoded. There's another format that you can send it in. So this parse body did not really specify that. So I just assumed, and the assumption was right. Okay, if I write JSON over here, it will parse the JSON body, which is exactly what we want. So now body can be logged like this, headers can be logged like this, query can be logged like this. Okay. All of this is in the slides, nothing extra. I've just added 4 more routes. One more thing I have to discuss, then we can start to create our project. The one more thing that we need to discuss is databases. How can I do a prisma.user.create over here? Is it standard or is there something extra we have to do? And the answer is there is something extra we have to do. So that is why the next section is important. How do you, given this standard boilerplate code, express application, whatever, Hono application that seems to work, I'm able to log all the inputs, I'm able to return the output. How do I add a database here? And are there challenges in case you are using serverless? The answer is yes, there are challenges if you're using serverless. So let's see what those challenges are. Before that, quick poll. Do we understand abhi tak ka code? I've sort of skimmed through the middleware slide for now. We'll come back to it. It's very easy to read. You should be able to read it. But let's do the important thing next, which is connecting to the database. Do we understand everything until this point? Can we move on to connecting to the database next? All right, simple enough. So you would assume that connect to database normally itni kya problem ho gayi, but there is a problem. The problem is that serverless environments have one very big problem when it comes to databases. There can be many connections open to the database, since there can be many workers open in various regions. This is the problem you will see. If you have 1 million users hitting your application, you have small containers, thousands of containers that are running. All of them will try to connect to your database, and a database can only have limited number of connections. You can't have 20,000 connections open to a database. It will overwhelm. In fact, there's a limit, a PG max connection limit. You'll hit that limit very soon. If you're using serverless with databases natively. So if you have a Postgres database, irrespective of if it's from Prisma or if you're using it natively, a worker, even though if your application is not being used, you will not see a problem because only one worker or two workers will be running. But when your application does grow, you will see a bunch of workers start up, all of them trying to connect to your database, which is a problem. Your database will reach a limit. You'll start to see logs that say database maximum connection limit reached, something like that. So the answer over here is, honestly, you would do this, you would deploy it, you will see eventually, you see logs, you will eventually reach this blog post, and then blog post ke through you'll understand how to fix this. But what's happening when you're fixing this is using something called connection pooling. So here is another jargon, which is honestly 2-3 people have told me that this was asked in an interview, and thank you, you quote mein pada tha. What are we learning? Something called connection pooling. Have you ever wondered how Prisma makes money, considering it's just an open source library that everyone uses to put data in a database? Prisma never makes money. NeonDB makes money, or AWS RDS makes money. Whoever you are hosting your database on makes money. How does Prisma make money? Prisma is just a library. How does Express make money? Express doesn't. Express does not make money other than donations. But is Prisma that dumb as well? Because not that making an open source library is dumb, but my point is that Prisma has raised a lot of money. So they probably have, VCs haven't put in money for good charity. So how does Prisma make money? And the answer is, one of the offerings is this connection pooling offering. They know that a lot of people use serverless servers. As I said, serverless is a technology that can be used in databases as well. But a lot of people use serverless Cloudflare workers, AWS Lambda, which means they will have a bunch of these Lambda workers available. If you try to connect to a database directly from all of these, it will be a problem. Your database will overwhelm. So what Prisma introduced is an offering for connection pooling. What is it called? Connection pooling. What does it mean? The name is sort of giving it away. Ki Prisma says apna database alag rakh lo yaar. Keep your database separate. I will create a pool. connection pool, and all of your serverless workers will connect to this connection pool. I don't have Postgres running over here. Something else I have. I don't have Postgres running over here. It is a rather random process that is holding all of these connections, which can be, thousands of connections, but it only has one or two connections to the main database. The connection pool is connected to the database and is connected to millions of whatever, workers on the left, and it makes sure कि database पे connection दो ही हो, whatever request you sent from here, the connection pool will make sure it forwards it through their connection that it already has and returns it. It's called a connection pool. Okay, if you want to connect to the database, don't connect directly, connect through the pool, connect through a middle layer, which is a single machine. That is not a single machine, but you get the idea. Single connection that you have to create. जिसके आगे there are one or two connections that are created to your main database. So when you are using serverless, irrespective of if you're using it on Cloudflare, on Vercel, if you ever deploy a Next.js application that you have deployed on Vercel, where you are also doing the same thing, you are connecting to the backend in your API routes in Next.js, same problem will happen. You will have to introduce connection pooling there as well. You'll see this log in your Vercel logs. Okay, maximum connection limit reached on the database, and hence you'll have to introduce something similar called connection pooling. So Prisma, the library, has dependencies that is probably another problem. There are two problems here. One is this. The other is that Prisma has a few dependencies that unfortunately, again, Cloudflare workers don't understand. Cloudflare workers don't understand Express. They don't understand the Prisma library natively as well. And hence, they have introduced something both for connection pooling and for the problem of that Prisma natively nahi chalta hai workers pe, so some extra library you have to add. So firstly, let's understand how do you introduce connection pooling in Prisma. So Prisma has this offering called Accelerate, which is how they make money. Prisma Accelerate is a fully managed global connection pooling and caching layer for your existing database. So there is a database that already exists. You should not connect directly to the database from your workers. You should use Prisma Accelerate, which, as the name suggests, makes your queries faster, caches your queries, but also is a connection pool. And hence, if you have a serverless offering where you have hundreds of machines, each of these machines should be connected to the pool. Pool does not have any limit. Databases do. Databases have a, like Postgres specifically has a PG, limit of how many people can, PG connection limit of how many connections it can create. This does not. And hence you can have thousands of workers that are running connected to the connection pool, which is forwarding the request to the database. So let's quickly create the connection pool. Let's create a database as well. So abhi we are going to introduce databases to our Hono application. So step one, create a database. How can we create a database? Very simple. Go to neon.tech, get yourself a free one. You probably already have a free one. They give you one free serverless database. We haven't talked about this, but the database that you start over here is also serverless. So if I log over here or log in over here and create a new project and call it, serverless test, let's say, and click on create, I can copy the database credentials and let me keep them handy for now. Let me paste them over here in Excel draw. So you guys can also see it, and that's fine. You guys can't see it. But this is my database credentials. This is not what I will give to my Node.js application. My Node.js application will not connect to the database directly. I will open Prisma Accelerate. That's prisma.io/accelerate. I will now log in over here. This is a full, cloud service of sorts, similar to neon.tech or Cloudflares, where I can log in. Let me log in with 100xdevs@gmail.com. This is how they make money. What do you want to do? Do you want to create a new database? They also let you create databases very similar to Neon Tech. But let's say we want to use an existing database. What do we want to do on the existing database? We want to accelerate. Scale your database with connection pooling and global caching, which is exactly what we want. We want to make sure we have connection pooling. We want to make sure there is a centralized connection pool that everyone is connecting to and forwarding requests to the main database. So accelerate is what I want. It asks me कि आपके database credentials क्या हैं, फिर मुझे बताओ. It is asking the database credentials of this main database. So let me paste them here. What is the region you want your connection pool in? probably in India for us, because let's say our users will be in India, but if they're in the US, then select US over here. Connect your database. My database is connected. So I now have not just a database, I have a connection pool on top of the database. And this connection pool is what I will put in my Prisma schema, my environment variable, my database URL is not this anymore. It is this right here. Accelerate.prisma data.net question mark API key equal to this, and whatever this very long URL is. This very long URL is my database URL now. It is not Postgres // whatever my database credential was before. Now that is done, now let's try to write the Prisma code. So let me take a pause here. Do we understand the problem with using databases with Cloudflare workers or any serverless technology? Problem is, thousands of workers will start up, especially when your application hits scale. Each one of these servers is running independently, and hence it's connected to the database independently, and hence the database will get overwhelmed. So what do? We introduce a new connection pool in the middle. You actually don't have to do all of this. Neon also provides, let me show you. If I go over here, click on connect. Neon may, I have actually, by default connection pooling is enabled. So you don't need Prisma Accelerate. I just wanted to show because, Prisma, whatever, how does it make money? But if you are deploying a Postgres database in a serverless environment, if you have connection pooling checked over here, you are good. This credentials or this Postgres credentials are good enough. You don't need, Prisma Accelerate or you don't need them, because Neon also provides you a connection pooling URL. It provides you a raw URL as well. This is your raw database URL. If I flip on connection pooling, this is my connection pooling URL, which means this will handle all the same things. This will sit over here in the middle. I am connected to this guy, and the main database is behind. So Neon also provides you connection pooling. Prisma Accelerate also provides you connection pooling. You can decide which one of those two you want to use. This is my Prisma Accelerate connection database URL. This is my Neon DB connection pooling database URL. Okay. There are two problems. The first problem was this: you need connection pooling. The second problem was Prisma is not supported out of the box on the Cloudflare runtime. So you have to do something extra. We'll see what that extra thing is. But do we understand this much? Do we understand the problem of using databases in a Next.js project that is deployed on Vercel, because Vercel is also serverless, or on a Cloudflare worker? The problem is you need connection pooling. You can get connection pooling directly from Neon. But if you have your own database that you have deployed on your own server, then you will need a separate connection pooling offering, which, in this case, you can use either Prisma Accelerate or you can use Neon. May just flip on connection pooling. You're good to go. Let's do a poll. Do we understand this? Do we understand connection pooling? ये नहीं समझ आया, घोड़े खुल के 4 समझ आ गया, मतलब 88% is like 85%. ठीक है, I'll answer Q&A very quickly. Almost done here, then we'll proceed. So now let's quickly try to add Prisma to our project. So I already have the project locally. It was running right now. How do you initialize Prisma in a project? npm install Prisma. You can save it as a dev dependency. I am using bun, so I'll have to do bun add Prisma. npx Prisma init. Again, I'm using bun, so I'll do bunx Prisma init. Doesn't matter either way. Then let's create a very basic to-do schema. Very simple. We've already done this, right? Open Prisma/schema.prisma and add all the schema that you have. You might have a users model. You might have a to-do model where there is an ID, which is an, let's say, integer, which is the default key or whatever, the primary key, and by default it's auto increment. Or if you want to get fancy, it's a string, which by default is UUID. And a to-do will have some title, for example, go to gym, something like that. Whether or not it is done, which is a boolean, which is by default false. Anytime the to-do is created, by default it is false, then becomes true. You can add a foreign key relationship here. I'm not getting into the schema. You get the idea. I have created my schema of my database. What is the next step? Migrating my database. So for that, I need an environment variable called database URL. So let me create a .env file. It's already there. And let me replace this database URL with which URL? My connection pooling URL or my main Postgres URL? What should I use? You should use your main Postgres URL. You should not use your Prisma Accelerate URL. यहाँ पे you can check this on or off, that doesn't matter. But your main DB URL is what you need to put here when you are migrating the database, when you are putting tables in there. Abhi, my database does not have any tables. If I click on tables, it shows nothing because I have not yet migrated my database. It does not have any users table, to do table. So what is the next step? Bunex Prisma migrate dev and a name for your migration. Again, something we have done many times. The only thing I changed was in the global.env file that Prisma init created, I added my database credentials. So Bunex Prisma migrate dev and a name for my migration, which is init. This is going to take some time because NeonDB is just slow when you're migrating. So while this happens, we have already logged into Prisma. We have created ourselves a accelerate URL. I already have it over here. This database URL is the one that I just created. It is my connection pooling URL. It is the URL I'm going to use finally when I'm connecting to the database. Now comes the extra part that you have to do whenever you are using Prisma Accelerate, which is this offering that we are using. If you are using Prisma Accelerate, you have to install @prisma/extensions accelerate. And when you are generating the client, you have to add --no engine at the end. So two things you have to change. Add this as the dependency, add --no engine at the end. My database has migrated, which is great. If I go to my database, I will see there is a to-do table and a user table. Wait for it. I see a to-do table, I see a user table. My database has migrated. Now, my database URL is going to be the accelerate URL. When I was migrating, it was not the accelerate URL. I put the real URL. But now, I can replace this with my accelerate URL. So let me replace this with whatever I got over here in setup accelerate, which was this thing right here. This URL is what I have now. It is my connection pool URL. It is not my main database URL. Let me add @prisma/extensions accelerate. Let me do a npx prisma generate to generate the client. Only extra thing is I've added --no engine over here. Why? Because I will no longer use @prisma/client. Notice, import Prisma client from not @prisma/client, @prisma/client/edge, because we are running it on the edge. Because वहाँ पे Prisma client को जो चीजें चाहिए होती हैं, they don't work by default on a serverless environment on a Cloudflare worker. I don't want to use @prisma/client. I want to use @prisma/client/edge. So this is where I will import my Prisma client from. Since I am using the accelerate offering that caches my queries, that makes them faster, and that adds connection pooling, I have to import with accelerate from @prisma/extensions accelerate. If you were using the NeonDB ka connection pool, you wouldn't need to do this. If you were using connection pooling from NeonDB, you wouldn't need this. But since we are using Prisma Accelerate, which makes my queries faster, caches my queries, and also gives me a connection pool, I have to use import with accelerate from here. And whenever I am initializing the Prisma client, I will not simply do new Prisma client. I will also do .extends with accelerate. एक छोटी सी चेंज हुई है यहाँ पे कि not one thing, many things have changed. I am not importing Prisma client from @prisma/client. I am importing it from @prisma/client/edge. Since I am using Prisma Accelerate, I am importing with accelerate from @prisma/accelerate, which is a dependency I added over here. And lastly, when I am doing a new Prisma client, I'm adding $extends with accelerate. These are the three things that I've changed. Okay? Let's try to bring this to our application. So if I go to my application, what do I have to do? सबसे पहले import Prisma client from @prisma/client/edge. That is the first thing I have to do. Second thing, import with accelerate from @prisma/extensions accelerate. Third thing, I need to whatever, add the database credentials. So sorry, initialize the Prisma client. I am unsure if you can do it directly over here. I don't think you can. Let's try it. Let's try to, do a const Prisma client equal to new Prisma client. What did it expect? Data source URL, which is, let me just paste the URL natively for now so that we don't have to get into environment variables in Cloudflare workers. We will eventually. Abhi ke liye, let me just paste the database URL here directly, which was this thing right here. Dot dollar extends with accelerate. Cool. This is how I have initialized my Prisma client. When you are in serverless environments, it's a bad idea to have global variables because whenever your request is handled, it sort of gets handled in the context of this guy. So you shouldn't have global variables, or if you do have them, you should have them somewhere in this C variable, in the context variable. This is a bad idea, and that is why I said this might not work. This might give you problems in production, which is why I would for now put it over here. You can abstract it into a function call, that is fine. You can somehow add it to this C context variable as well by adding a middleware. Those are all approaches we can get into. But long story short, global variables, bad idea in serverless environments. So let's not have any global variables. Let's add it over here. Akira, that means every request will have a new instance to the database. Sort of. It doesn't matter because it's connection pooling anyways, right? So even if you have multiple clients, every request gets a new client. That doesn't cause any problems. But I do get this, there should be a way to create a global variable. But again, global variables don't make sense in serverless because every request is getting handled in a new context. So global variable could change. Even if you change the global variable, it doesn't change it everywhere else, right? So maintaining state in memory generally is a bad idea in serverless. Maintaining global variables, bad idea. That is why I put it over here. Okay, let me remove everything else from here. Let me simply do await Prisma client dot user dot create, and let's say I do get the body. So await rec dot body or c dot rec dot body dot JSON, and whatever username, body dot username, and then password, body dot password, something like this. What was the schema? It was name, email, and password. So name equal to body dot name, password, and email equal to body dot. So the third thing, name, your password, email. Okay, this should hopefully put things in the database. Let's see if that happens or not. And then just return the user whatever they want. Whatever const user equal to this, and then c.json id user.id, something like this. So what have I done? Let's read it again. We had our old code. I imported Prisma client from @prisma/client/edge. I imported with accelerate from @prisma/extension accelerate. Why did I do this? Because if you notice, this database URL isn't a standard Prisma database URL. It is something else. It starts with Prisma : //. So it doesn't make any sense to add, this is not a standard protocol. MySQL is a protocol, Postgres is a protocol, Mongo is a protocol, Prisma isn't. So, if you are using this connection pool, you have to tell the client that you are going to use the accelerate offering of Prisma. Ye database URL uska hai. It is not the main Postgres database URL. Then we simply insert things in the database. We return the user the same thing. So let's try it out. Let's do a npm run dev. Let's try to hit this endpoint with a email, a password, and a name. Let's send this request and see what happens. It says ID1, which means it's working. ID1 tells you, right, that's the first ID created in the database. If I send it again, ID2. If I send it again, ID3. If I explore my database over here, what do the tables say? The user table now has 3 entries. So simple enough. Let's try to deploy it. There is one very big problem here. You have this as a string. This should be an environment variable. You should not hard code your database credentials over here. We'll come to how to fix that. But let's try to deploy it. So npm run deploy. Let me send a request here now. Basically change the URL to the production URL and hopefully ID4 comes. No, it does not. I added extra slash here. There you go. ID4, ID5, so on and so forth. So there's your application that's deployed on the internet with routing, with database, so on and so forth. There's just one problem. The problem is the data source URL is sort of hard coded here. So here is another reason why you should not have a global variable, because you can't access environment variables yahan pe. You can only access environment variables inside using this C context. So if I go to my Cloudflare worker dashboard, where is it? It is this one right here. If I see the week to do application week 32, I can go to settings. I can add an environment variable. Let me call it database underscore URL. Let me paste, the database URL here. Deploy. Now this database URL sort of exists in my Cloudflare dashboard. So I can access it like this. You see a type error here. We'll come how to fix that. Just TS ignore it for now. But now the database URL is a secret which exists over here. And hence, whenever I am sort of accessing it, I'll access it directly over there. It's not in my source code, which is good because you should not put your secrets in your source code. Simple enough, simple enough. All right. Let's try to deploy it again. So it's telling you, okay, dashboard se kuch cheezein aapne change kari thi. You changed a few things from the dashboard. You will override them. So I'm selecting yes right now. But yes, whenever you redeploy, your secret will also get updated. So as you can see, the secret sort of went away because I don't have the secret here locally. You should ideally have that in your wrangler.json c. So yahan pe you should add all of your database credentials over here. So where's database underscore URL, whatever your URL is, it should be added in your wrangler.json c global file. Something like this, so that it doesn't get overridden whenever you're redeploying the application. Let me re-add it manually from here for now. Database URL is this thing. Deploy, and it was clearly telling you also update your Wrangler config file with these changes to keep the local development and the environment in sync. So आपको local file में भी ये variables add करने हैं. If you don't add this, whenever you redeploy, the sort of application will sort of delete the database URL that you added manually. Let's see, does it work now? If I send this request, it does work. So what did I do? If you look at the code now, the code does not have the database credential hard coded. I am picking it up from an environment variable. This environment variable is only accessible inside a request, inside a context, which is another reason you can't really do this, because you will not have access to, there is no C variable here. The context variable only appears inside the request, which makes sense in serverless generally. Serverless में जब भी कोई request initiate होती है, there is where the environment variables are injected. There is no concept of global variables in serverless because each request is getting independently handled, let's say by small worker or whatever, and hence global variables daloge, you'll see very confusing things. Always all the variables should be reinitialized here, and especially in this case, as you can see, the environment variable is only available over here. Cool. We have a very basic version. It's putting things in the database. Can you create the to-do version as well? Very simple, right? Sign in should return them the JWT. To-do should return them let them create the to-do, put it in a database. This should return all the, query all the to-dos and return it. Do you want me to write it? I'm hoping it's simple enough to write. The only challenging thing that's left is middlewares, which is honestly not very challenging, as you can see, as you'd expect middlewares to run. App.use, whatever your middleware is, which means extract the authorization header, do a JWT.decode. If everything is good, call next. If everything is not good, then return you don't have access. So very simple way to add a middleware. And these 2 points don't need to be authenticated. These 2 endpoints do need to be authenticated. So in के ऊपर I've added app.use. this specific middleware. What is the middleware doing? Extracting the authorization header and simply calling next right now. But of course, you should do validation here, do a jwt.decode, make sure the user is correct, and then only call next. So let me put a log here just to see if it's working or not. So let me put auth header found, and then यहाँ पे auth header not found. Let me rerun this. So npm run dev locally. Let me try to hit it. What was the endpoint? The endpoint was /API/v1/todo. So if I hit this endpoint now locally, so localhost :8787 /API/v1/todo. It says message user is Harkirat, which means the control did reach here, and it said auth header found because I am sending a auth header over here. If I remove this and try to send it, it will say unauthenticated, you don't have access. So simple enough. How do you add a middleware? This middleware that I've added here will only apply to the requests after it, which means this request and this request. It will not apply to the requests above it. So if I send a request to /signin, then the request will go, even though I am not sending an authorization header, because sign in requests and sign up requests do not require authorization headers. Only the to-do request or the user request or whatever you're sending, this to-do request, get to-do request, post to-do request requires it. So simple enough. Can you finish the to-do application backend? Can you deploy it for free? Because you don't have to pay anything until 100K requests a day, which is something you're probably not hitting for a while. That ends the class. Do we understand everything? Do we understand initializing a Hono application, adding middlewares over there, connecting them to a database using Prisma Accelerate, creating a connection pool in Prisma Studio, creating a connection pool outside Prisma Studio in whatever the other thing, using add Prisma /client/edge over here, because add Prisma /client is something that the Cloudflare runtime does not understand. Add Prisma /client/edge is something that the Cloudflare runtime or any edge runtime understands, and hence we're importing it from there. Do we understand this? Let's do a poll. Either way, the class is officially done now. Then I'll do Q&A iske baad. Is the poll started? I don't think so. So let me start it. Cool. Simple enough. 93%. Very good. Okay. Time for Q&A. Let me just open chat and you guys can post your questions there. Any specific question for today or otherwise? Preferably today for now, and then I can answer other questions as well. Spam of a Notion docs. Probably a lot of repetition. Database URL environment. Yeah, so very standard thing that you should know is you should never hard code database credentials, right? In your source code, because you will commit it to GitHub, everyone will see it. Hence, you should always pick them up from environment variables. When you do that in Cloudflare Workers, you have to first specify them here, so that whenever you are deploying your application, you are, these credentials sort of reach the Cloudflare dashboard. The Cloudflare dashboard knows what your database credentials are, or other things, Redis credentials, Kafka credentials, JWT secrets, so on and so forth. So you have to add them here, and then whenever you deploy your application, those variables will appear over here as well, wherever the worker dashboard is. Yeah, they will appear here as well, and your application can use them. Your source code doesn't have them hard coded. What are the pros and cons of using Convex? It is a backend as a service. So there are, simplest pro is you can move really fast. Like Superbase is the same thing, right? Even Firebase sort of is very similar if you use Firebase में functions. Problem is, Strapi is the same thing. At scale, it will be very expensive, it will be very hard to move off. But the upside is you can move very fast. Let's say I want to change the schema again, like update the schema. So now we have to change the database URL. How will it work? Why would you change database URL when you're updating the schema? I don't understand that. Database URL remains the same. You only update. I think you meant we have to update the client. That's a beautiful question. Yeah, we'll probably have to redeploy the application whenever we are redeploying the changing the schema, because the existing workers that are running. They don't have the new client, and that's fine. That will happen. Whenever you're updating the schema. Let's say you added another thing here called, whatever, um, logs. So you will update your code as well, right? You will do a whatever Prisma client dot logs dot create kahin pe. So you will redeploy the application. So your deployment will, already reach, your migration will reach, and your client that is generated will, already have logs. So you will not see a red squiggly over here. Yeah. Start from here. Creation needs multiple roles. That is true. Got it. Authorization with role access. Well, I don't know what the standard is, but okay, I understand what you want. I don't know what smart on I don't know what, I have not read what FHIR is. I'm assuming it's some hospital protocol. I can read through it. But yeah, basically what you need is role-based authentication and authorization. So from first principles, what do you think this is? You have multiple types of users. That means what? That means in your database schema, you have, a user with a field called type, which could be one of many things, or whatever. Let's call it role, user role. You said it's, what did you say? Patient, and what else? Doctor and admin. The first thing you will do is this: your database, whenever a user entry is coming, you will not make email unique. You will make, whatever. You will add a uniqueness constraint over role, email. Okay, a single harkirat96@gmail.com and admin can just be a single entry. Harkirat96@gmail.com and patient can be a single entry, because a doctor can be a patient as well, right? If the doctor is not feeling well. So that's how your schema would change. How would authentication or authorization change? Simple, right? You will have multiple dashboards for your admin, for your patients, and for your, whatever, doctors. Doctors.hospital.com is the front end for the doctors. Patient.100xfs.com is the login for the patients, so on and so forth. So you'll have multiple routes: /API/user /v1, or patient /v1/sign up. You'll have another one, /admin /v1/sign up, or admin shouldn't sign up. That should just be gated directly from the database. But, doctor /v1/sign up. There be, there should be some, not every new doctor should be put in the database by a manager, by an admin. They shouldn't be allowed to sign up. But signing may be similar, multiple routes. The only difference is, okay, when you are signing the JWT, whenever you're doing JWT.sign, you can do a bunch of things. So you can add the ID. That's good enough, because database may we have, access to what role the user has. But a good idea might be to just hardcode the role of the user here as well. And secret should be different for admin, for the other guy, doctors, and the third guy. If you do this, you're good. Your JWT that is signed needs to be signed separate, using separate secrets for admin, doctors, and users. Preferably don't put the role over here. There are some downsides to doing this. Don't put the role over here. Just sign the ID, and sign it for using different secrets based on who it is. And iske baad you shouldn't see any problem. There is no security loophole in whatever you're doing anymore. Cool. Just practice for database schema. We can do that. If you know recoil, Zustan is very simple. Probably Sargam will take this. He just likes doing it. Next.js and Zustan is something he's pretty good at. So we'll probably get him to do it. Full stack run intermediate project like doctor appointment because you're building it. Sure, that's not like hospital management is the ugliest project, right? At least it gives you a little, it gets a little jiffy because college mein hi karte the. Hospital management is the first sort of project. I'll do something similar, don't worry. Like CRUD application, nothing fancy, no WebSockets, but a lot of CRUD functionality. What happened after? Yes, I want to know partially, but I couldn't understand. Got it. Cool. So let me create a video which has an admin dashboard, a user dashboard, and we can go from there. That's all you need, right? उसके बाद I think आपका काम चल जाएगा. I've not heard of this. Let me read through it. I want to know if this could be used for good multi-role authentication. What is key check? Yeah, this might provide what you need. It looks closer to like a next auth sort of library. I could be wrong. It seems like it's more than that. It gives you an admin dashboard. It's more closer to a clerk rather than a next auth. It gives you a dashboard where you can see your users, things like these. It's like an open source version of clerk, from what I can understand right now. And correct me if I'm wrong. And it has a lot of GitHub stars. It might just be, it might just be what you need. Open source identity management for modern applications. How do you use it though? Examples. Yeah. So this should give you what you want. But there are probably easier ways. Like this is a full, like if you think from first principles and build it, it might just be easier than using this. Seems like you're overcomplicating the problem. It's not that hard. Just add rows like I talked about, and you don't do it. If you want to use this, you can use this as well. This does provide the fine-grained control that you're looking for. It provides it using their own middlewares. You can create your own middlewares, like admin middleware, a user middleware, a doctor middleware, and that's the same thing. But it's an interesting project I would like to explore nonetheless, and happy to do a video on it if and when we get time. The root of the project is Mobile Magic. This everything else is a bunch of extra things. Mobile Magic is the root of the project. Yeah. So the reason I did not use a monorepo here because there's not a lot of code sharing amongst them. These are independent things that you need. I don't know what ext is. I forgot what this is. This is like expo, like the default React app, Next.js app, so on and so forth. A bunch of ops files, which again, don't have any JavaScript or TypeScript code in there. That's why I just separate it out. Think about my explain the use of connection pooling in Prisma Accelerate again. How exactly does it help with database connection? The global variable thing went up my head. Yeah. So three things you're asking me, which are probably which were the difficult things for today. One, no global variable in serverless. Two, connection pooling. Three, Prisma Accelerate. All three very good questions. Let's start with the first one. No global variables in serverless. So if you ever create any serverless application, not just Cloudflare workers, even Lambda or I don't know, Google Cloud Functions, in the end, ऐसा assume करो कि whenever your route is being hit, a new small mini worker is starting where the thing is running and it's stopping. So why do you use global variables usually? Okay, let total request underscore count equal to 0, and then यहाँ पे I'll do whatever total request count plus plus something like this. That's the reason you might want to use global variables. The problem here is what? Okay, a new worker is starting every time, or there are 10 workers running that are handling requests. So this doesn't make any sense. The first machine might have, or first worker might have this as 10, second might have this as 20. There's no there is no point storing variables like this in a memory state. Store करने का कोई point नहीं है. There is some point to do this if you're not using serverless. You have a single virtual machine where you're increasing the variable. Fine, works. If you have serverless where machines are coming up, going down, or whatever, workers are coming up, going down, this variable doesn't make sense. That's one of the reasons you should not use global variables in serverless, because whenever this request starts, when the request start, this is what it wants to run. Serverless, if you create a serverless environment yourself, you want कि ये मेरा context है जो मुझे run करना है. इसके बाहर की चीजें you want to sort of avoid. Reading, writing, because one of many reasons of that is यही कि global variables don't make sense in serverless environments. वो सब चार अलग जगह वो बढ़ रहे होंगे. But the bigger reason for, like, it still might work here, by the way. I mean, Prisma client अगर मैं बाहर लिखता हूँ, it most probably will work. It just makes me a little iffy to do this. Like, for some reason, I feel very weird defining this global variable, because back of the head ये चीज आती है कि whenever the serverless thing starts, वो यही यूज़ करेगा, ग्लोबल वेरिएबल को सॉर्ट ऑफ इग्नोर कर देगा। दिस कुड टोटली जस्ट बी प्लोसिबो कि मुझे लग रहा है कि ऐसा होता है, बट ऐसा होता है कि इन सम सर्वरलेस एनवायरनमेंट इट माइट हैपन, और आई थिंक इट डज हैपन। जैसे फायरबेस से मुझे याद आ रहा है, जहाँ पे ये वेरिएबल आप बाहर डिफाइन कर रहे हो, डिफाइनिंग दिस सेपरेटली, दिस final handler will not have access to it, something like that. So इसलिए that was one of the reasons I recommended कि don't define this outside, define this inside. But the bigger reason you have to do that is because you can't get access to the environment variable outside. ये c.env.database URL comes from C, which is this context variable that is defined in the handler over here. You don't have access to it outside, and hence it doesn't make sense to define this global variable outside. Can you still do it? You can still do it. You can hard code the database URL here. It may or may not work. Try it out and let me know. High probability it will work. Connection pooling. You have a DB. You started a serverless environment where thousands of workers are running, and they're trying to connect to the database, trying to put things in there. The problem is database is not like an HTTP server. It can't handle, let's say, a million requests together, and hence the database will start to reject some of these connections. It will say, "ये तो नहीं हो सकता." If you try to do this, this specific connection will get rejected because the database will give you a connection pool request limit reached sort of a error. How do you fix this? You say क्या मेरे को database से connect करना ही नहीं है. I don't want to connect to the database. I want to connect to a process, a simple, let's say, Node.js process or whatever. It's called a pool, which maintains a single connection to the database. So database के पास एक ही connection है. Pool has thousands of these connections. Everyone is connected to the pool. Asks what they want. The pool does making the request faster. The pool caches a bunch of requests, and the pool makes sure कि एक ही request हो database को, sorry, एक ही connection हो database को. The database is only has one open connection, so that all of these connections sort of don't connect directly to the database. The database doesn't get overwhelmed or reach the connection limit. Third thing is Prisma Accelerate, which is nothing, the name is giving it away. Accelerate matlab they speed up your database queries, they cache your database queries. You don't need Prisma Accelerate on serverless. You do 100% need connection pooling. Connection pooling you can get either on Prisma Accelerate, which is this, or you can get it directly on neon.tech. Just make sure when you are connecting, connection pooling is checked over here. That is the URL that you're copying. Cool. These are the three sort of difficult things we learned. All right. This is very good because it's a whatever implementation of what we made already. What else is this? Is the same thing? Is it like second brain? Looks like it. Looks decent. This looks even better. I mean like decent-ish. ऊपर बहुत अच्छा था, नीचे का थोड़ा गंदा हो गया. Looks average. This looks decent as well. Average only. Let's see. Where did it go? ये थे ना आप नहीं. Once done. This one looks like, I don't know, has more projects. I don't know if it's good or not. Refresh. Where did it go? Just project review. Let's not do that. Let's do that independently at some point, maybe in a separate class. Dashboard. I'll just look at the demo. Where is it? I don't see a demo link over here. I've been working on this process. I've implemented everything. That is good. Just show me a demo link. It would be good for me to see that. But good that you're pursuing one project deeply, which is better than doing 10 different projects which are average. Do serverless support WebSockets? So no. I don't know if someone has added that until now, but no. Serverless are meant to be transitory, right? Ephemeral, which means वो आते हैं जाते हैं, and WebSockets are meant for longer connections. So no. I believe is to contribute to Bun's code base and using DSL longer. Does LeetCode have Zig as a language or what? Any advice? What should we approve? No, just keep at it. No real advice. Cool. Yeah, projects link look good. I'm not opening them. I should probably do a separate class for reviews, but again, I'm as you can see, I don't get too much time to review them. So get them reviewed from probably some brother or senior who will actually give it time, half an hour, and talk through it, read through your code base. Return. Yeah, I think that's good. And finally try to get a full time offer. Need to log on. I would not recommend Abhi doing GSOC. I would just focus on Cal and convert it. Happening still reviewing. You should go. It's very good. Yeah, you should go. But just make sure call exam fine. Don't screw up your Cal internship. Convert full time there. Because वहाँ पे you'll probably have to take a holiday from your work. I would not recommend you do that right now. Convert to full time. Go to the next one. Maybe don't make sure that doesn't suffer because of that. Okay, answer this one. So close it. This guy has more than one project. Let's see. Oh, everything is gated. UI average, UI average, UI average. Decent, but again, yeah, decent. I don't know what this is. I don't know what this is. This looks decent. Probably seems like a client project, which is not bad. Decently, not bad. Again, as I said, find someone and get it reviewed from them. It's better. Done. About your contribution, cohort 3 more. I agree. I'm just not getting the time to review these. I'll give a bounty, but yeah, I feel like I saw this yesterday. Or I was reading through this yesterday. Did I comment something on it? I don't know if someone else created a similar PR, but I did look at something like this yesterday. This had the retry logic, right? But yeah, I do understand your question and concern. And yeah, I'll do those. I'm just not getting enough time to review these PRs. I don't know what's the best way to do this. Probably when I create the issue, I'll assign the bounty, and the good ones I'll post on P0 on Discord, and we can go from there. I just need time to give attention to this. That's all. Done. What is this? Oh yeah, this is something I'm looking at. Cool. Any other questions? Anything else I missed? Oh, oopsie daisy. More Notion docs. Ignoring the review for now. As I said, we can either do a separate class, or I can. Let's see if we can get 5 people that can look at your projects and review them. Thoda one, not 1 to 1, but like 1 to 10 versus and look at it more effectively. I'm just skimming through them. I think you're the Japanese guy, right? I remember you from Shuru of the classes. What are you doing now? Have you found a job? Not. I'm already following you, so just message me and let me know if referral is what you're looking for. I supervisor think that's a better second-hand Mac. Second build kind of for the last thing that really want to decide that's okay, not very healthy. I might the most skilled programmer inside the room. Create a lot of projects, dude. I think that's the only thing that that's very helpful / helps you build. Lakshman here, pass out, currently working on this company, bunch of projects. Let's see if we can find a good one. I think I already saw this last week. So yeah, some of these projects I saw last week. I'm assuming you're the same guy. These are just GitHub repos. Yeah, it's very hard for me to read them. Always a good idea to put live links, but let me just look at one of these. I don't know what this is. What else? I mean, it's a type error, right? So when you try to build it locally, you should see the same error. To try to debug it locally, what does it say? Yeah, just open this page.tsx file. You should see a red squiggly. If you don't see a red squiggly, try to build it locally. If you don't, or just put a TS above it. That should fix it. Not that that's the right way to do it. But yeah, just build the file locally. You should see the same error locally and try to. Oh, there you go. So do you see a red squiggly over here, if the answer is yes, then wait, this is params. Wait, how do you have the room slug page.tsx? Or this slug here. That's fine. So I'm assuming the folder name is room ID there. Has this changed? Like there's something in Next.js. You have to await this or something. I can try it out. But long story short, if you don't see a red squiggly here, then there's probably a different way to fix it. If you see a red squiggly here, you know how to fix it, right? Read through the TypeScript error and fix it. There is something that has changed in Next.js recently. By recently, I mean, I don't know, 4 months ago or 6 months ago. Okay, you have to await these parameters, especially if this is a server component, which seems like this is. So you have to somehow call await params.json or something like that. And that sort of fixes it. So 1 second. Hello, class. Okay. Done. So वही है. Try to debug it basically yourself, or ask a TA, he'll help you. It should be simple enough. Yeah. Post your skills. There are a few that I know of. I can tell you the name. Rapid Fort or Rapid Force. भूल गया उसका नाम में. They are hiring interns. But I did try referring a few people through a guy, through an HR. They haven't yet received an interview call. That's one that I know that are hiring interns, but I don't know how to get in there, or which HR is going to help you or which user is going to help you. Find an employee and ask for a referral. That's probably the best way. Cool. We'll call it here, guys. Thank you all for joining. I will see you guys tomorrow. What will we do tomorrow? I don't know yet, but most probably we'll start Kubernetes. But you'll see it in the title. All right. We'll call it. Have a good night. Bye-bye.